Hi, I'm Callie. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm a museum educator at the Museum of Pop Culture. Today we're going to be writing mini horror stories. You'll need a piece of paper and a writing utensil to participate, so go grab your supplies and let's get started. Film communities often debate about what makes a horror film. For the purposes of this curriculum, we're going to define horror as content designed to cause fear, panic, terror, dread, or alarm in its audience. Horror can bring hidden fears to the surface and release strong or repressed emotions. But why does horror have such huge appeal? Why do we like to be scared, surprised, and shocked? Throughout these activities, we'll unpack some of these ideas and then look at the elements used to create horror. We'll then use what we learned to create our own mini horror stories. Horror can include some intense content and topics, so we've designed our activities to avoid violence, weapons, and gore. We ask that as you create, you also avoid content that could be potentially triggering to someone. Triggering refers to when someone sees, hears, or experiences something that reminds them of a previous trauma. Instead, focus on all of the other ways that horror can be conveyed through pacing, word choice, and storytelling. We will be looking at the 4 elements in horror that can be used to amplify your horror writing. The first is sounds and music. What can we hear? This can be the slow creak of a door opening, distorted circus music droning over a creepy carnival, or the sound of a character's heart beating. The second is spacing and distance between characters. This means how close or far the characters are from one another in any given scene. Is the zombie slowly creeping toward the characters? Or did a spooky ghost pop out of nowhere like this scene from Scooby-Doo?
Wait, who's me?
Like, what is it, Scoob?
I think he's had too many ice creams. A ghost!
The third element is word choice. What descriptive language is being used? How do the characters speak? Are there any words that stand out to you as odd or intriguing? In this clip from Get Out, we are off-put by the formality of Georgina and her old-timey word choice.
Well, I can assure you there was no funny business. Allow me to explain. I lifted your cellular phone to wipe down the dresser, and it accidentally came undone.
Yeah,
Rather than meddle with it further, I left it that way. How foolish of me.
The fourth is use of objects. Is there a significant object in the scene? Does it symbolize something important? The red balloon in It is an example of a significant object that represents the greater horror of the story.
Strange. There's usually a murderous clown attached to the other end of these.
We will take a closer look at these 4 elements as we move forward and then use them to enhance our mini horror piece at the end of this activity. Let's take a look at some horror writing and see if we can identify and unpack the elements that are used. For this activity, we'll use an excerpt from Danielle Vega's young adult novel, The Haunted. Here's some context for the scene. 9-year-old Maribeth Ruiz is walking home when she hears meowing coming from the notorious Steel House. She has always been afraid of the Steel House because the older kids in her town say it's haunted. Maribeth feels apprehensive about going onto the property, but the meowing kitten sounds like it's in trouble. She crosses the overgrown lawn of the Steel House and realizes that the meowing is coming from the cellar. She gathers up her courage and descends into the cellar to find the lost kitten. I will now read an excerpt from the book. During this read-through, just listen to the words and try to imagine the characters. The air grew very still around her, as though the house was holding its breath. Maribeth walked past a wall of shelves filled with old green bottles, the labels long since worn away, and stopped in front of a wooden trunk with a broken lock. A doll sat on top of the trunk, slumped against the wall. Its eyes had been plucked out of its face, and there were gouges around the empty sockets. Maribeth turned away from the doll, eyes straining against the darkness. Outside, the cellar door rattled in the wind. I should go back, she thought. It was cold, and her skin felt itchy and shivery. She could feel something down here with her. Something bad. The stairs creaked. It sounded like someone was walking very slowly down the steps, but Maribeth didn't see anyone there. A moment later, the scent of cologne wafted through the cellar. "What's your name?" asked the voice. "Maribeth Ruiz," she said, numb. She tried to sound more confident than she felt. Where was the voice coming from? For some reason, she looked over at the doll sitting on the trunk. The black eye holes stared back at her, but the doll's mouth stayed still. Fingers curled around Maribeth's wrist. They were cold and damp, like raw chicken just out of the fridge. Maribeth looked down at the fingers, but there wasn't anything there. She blinked, and there was still nothing there, but she could feel them. She tried to scream, but the sound didn't make it past her throat. Her lips trembled. The fingers squeezed tighter. A ragged, desperate sound finally clawed up her throat, but the walls were thick, and she knew no one would hear it. Outside, the wind blew the cellar door shut. How did you react? Take a look at this word bank. This includes some possible emotional responses you might have had listening to the excerpt. Write down a few reactions from this list that you experienced, or add your own. The next word bank includes some possible physical responses you might have had. Write down a few reactions from this list that you experienced while listening to the story, or add your own. The final word bank includes some possible verbal responses you might have had. Write down a few reactions from this list that you experienced while listening to the story, or add your own. Now it's your turn to use what you've learned about the elements of horror to create your own mini horror story. We will now use the Create Your Own Horror Story worksheet. Here's what you're going to do. 1. Pick a story starter. 2. Pick an object from Mopop's exhibit, Scared to Death, The Thrill of Horror. 3. Choose a horror element to enhance your story. 4. Get started on drafting your mini horror story. 5. Share it! First, pick a story starter. Pause this video and take a look at the 3 story starters. Pick the story starter that is most intriguing to you. Great! You may have noticed that there was a bold and underlined part in your story starter that said, "This item." You will now choose an object from Mopop's exhibit, Scared to Death, The Thrill of Horror, to be your spooky object in your story starter. Pause this video and choose your object. Next, we're going to choose a horror element to experiment with in your story. You can choose from sounds and music, distance between characters, or word choice. Now you'll get started on drafting your mini horror story. If you need inspiration, try to imagine yourself as the main character of this story. How would you feel? What might this object be, or who might it belong to? Use your imagination along with the story starter, object, and elements of horror to write your own mini horror story. If you need an example of a mini horror piece, one is provided on the Create Your Own Horror Story worksheet. Once you've finished your mini horror story, share it with others. Find someone in your home to tell your story to and see how they react. Post it to social media and tag Mopop Don't Stop. There are many ways to continue the creativity you've started today. You could turn your story into a graphic novel, film your story as a short video or TikTok, take a series of photos that shows every step of your story, or continue adding to your written story. If you're hungry for more horror, check out our list of young adult horror novels and films that might spark your imagination. Please use discretion when selecting these. Many contain mature content. Well, I'm Callie with Mopop signing off. Keep creating and stay spooky, everyone. Bye!